Hello, this is Anil Chintamaneni, and this is the second part of the videos on security changes in Vault 2017. In this video, we're going to focus on some of the UI changes that have been made at the object level. So, as an administrator, when you access the Details dialog, there is a Security tab. You may also notice the Effective Access tab, which we're going to talk about later. So for now, let's focus on the Security tab. In this particular case, there are no life cycles on the folder, which means the only security that is in effect is the object-based security. And that's why the security mode is disabled and it is set to object-based security. The administrator can check the override checkbox and set an override. And notice that the override can be state-based or manual. In a case where the definition security is set to override OBS, the state-based security is going to be applied to the object as an override. That's why an override can either come from a lifecycle state or it can be a manual override that is set by the admin at the object level. Notice that the permissions grid has changed. Instead of two grids, there is now this single grid that will allow you to add users or remove users or groups and set permissions. Allow, deny, or leave them blank, which is a soft deny. Soft denies are going to come into effect when a single user or a single group is present within a single gate. So for example, if user A is present in two different groups at the object-based security level, in one group, user A is set to allow for read permission in group A at OBS, and in another group, the same user is set to blank in group B at object-based level. Since it is in one gate, which is the object-based security level, user A will be given an allow for read permission at the OBS level. So when calculating permissions for a given user within a single gate, allow will supersede a soft deny. But if there is an explicit deny is going to supersede an allow. But keep in mind that calculation is only at a single gate level. When it comes to calculations across two gates, a deny in one gate will supersede an allow in the other gate. So even though at OBS level user A is allowed to read the object, if at the state level user A is denied from reading the object, the effective permission for user A for read is a deny. Okay, now let's talk about another change on the security tab, that is the effective security. Since we now have combination of permissions between object-based security and state-based security, this label is going to be helpful for the administrator to see what is the effective security mode for that object. Right now, since there is only object-based security that's in effect, the effective security is going to read object-based security. So let's go to a file that has object-based security and state-based security. So the drop-down in this case is not disabled. By default, it is set to state-based security, and the state right now is work in progress. So as an admin, you can now view state-based security for the object from within this interface. Notice that you can toggle back and forth between object-based security, which is different in this case, and state-based security to see the permissions between those two modes. And notice that the effective security in this case is combined because at the lifecycle definition level, the administrator has chosen to combine state-based security with object-based security for that particular definition. And if the administrator chooses to set an override on this object, he can do so by checking this box. As I mentioned earlier, override can come from a state or it can be manually set by the administrator. Notice that the grid is now available for editing so that the administrator can set an override. And notice that the effective security has changed to override. And the security mode also has changed to overridden security. And state-based security in this case is not available. And I'm not going to set an override at this time. So I uncheck the box and I am now back to state-based security and object-based security, which are acting together. Now let's talk about effective access. This is a very handy feature for the administrators, especially if you have multiple groups in your organization and it is hard to find out which user has which permissions for a given object. So by default, this drop down is set to effective access. It will also allow you to view object-based security and state-based security for a given user. So you can add users to this dialog by using the add members dialog. Notice that only users can be added. Now let me take, for example, the sales user. This particular user, sales1, is denied read, modify, and delete permissions for the object. Now let me add another user. Maybe I'll add these mechanical engineers as well as electrical engineers together and see their effective permissions. Notice that mechanical engineer users are allowed both read and modify permissions, whereas electrical engineers are allowed only read permissions. And note that this particular tab and these three views are read-only views. You cannot make edits to the permissions from within these views. In order to make edits to the permissions, you have to go to the security tab. You can not only see the effective access or effective permissions for a given user on this tab, you can also view what the object-based security is for those users. You can also see what the state-based security is for those users. And you can clear this list by simply removing those users from the grid. And while we are here, let me also show you a minor change that has been made to the propagation of object-based security. So for example, if I set an override on this folder and I remove this particular group and I select OK, I get this prompt that is for the propagation of permissions. In previous releases of Vault, this particular prompt is always set to propagate only changes and append permissions, regardless of what my selection was on this prompt in my previous propagation of permissions. Going forward, the selection on this prompt is going to be remembered for subsequent operations. So for this example, if I choose propagate entirely and replace permissions and say OK, when I come back to this dialog again, and if I, let's say, remove this group and say OK, my selection from previous propagation is remembered. So that's a subtle change that is made along with the other changes that are made to security. And this concludes the second part of the videos on security. Thank you for watching.